In this video, we are going to look at solving a problem using the substitution method. We see that it's a word problem, so my first step is just to read it. It says one patient drank 480 milliliters and has an IV running at 100 milliliters per hour. A second patient drank 60 milliliters and has an IV running at 125 milliliters per hour. When will both patients have the same intake of fluid? How much fluid will they have received? So my first step is to write equations for the scenario, and in this case for each patient. So patient 1 when I read through their information, I see that they drank 480 milliliters, so that feels like a starting amount of intake. I see they have an IV running at 100 milliliters per hour. This is a constant rate. I know that constant rates go with linear equations. So in my mind, I should be writing a y equals mx plus b equation for this scenario. And so using the information that we've learned the last several weeks and associating the constant rate with the linear is really helpful. So I write for my equation y equals the m, or slope, is the constant rate, so in this case 100, x plus b, which is the starting amount of 480. As I understand this problem, this equation would be calculating the total intake. So my y is standing for intake because they're getting 100 milliliters per hour plus the 480 that they drank. I also understand that the 100 milliliters per hour has to be multiplied by the number of hours. So that makes me understand my x, and so my x is representing hours. I'm going to make a very similar equation for patient 2. Patient 2, the information given, had the same features, and so I'm going to use the same model. So my y, again, is representing the intake for this patient. They had their IV running at 125 milliliters per hour, so that is my constant rate, and fill that in for m. And then they started off by drinking 60 milliliters, so that is my b, or my starting amount, in my equation. So we actually have done, in my opinion, the hardest work, which is writing the equations. From here, we have some algebra. We do have to pay attention to detail, but the algebra works in a very similar manner every problem. We are asked, when will both patients have the same intake? And we've talked about that word, the same, previously, meaning equal. So what I want to understand or to solve is, when will the intake for patient 1 equal the intake for patient 2, because setting them equal will calculate when their intake is the same. I replace each patient with its formula, so this is 100x plus 48, plus 480, and I replace the second patient with this formula of 125x plus 60. Now, we are definitely using the substitution method, because what we have done is we have taken the second formula and substituted it in for the y value. So if I look at the way that I set it up with patient 1 and patient 2, I really have taken this formula right here, this 100x plus 480, and I said, well, that's equal to y. And I've taken it over here into this and written it where the y is. So that is why this fits under substitution method, even though I really set up my formula here on the basis of those words the same. So now I have some algebra to do. And when we do the algebra, because of the equals, we want to do the opposite to both sides. I want to get my variables together, so I will subtract 100x from both sides. On the left, the 100x is canceled, so I have 480. On the right, I do the math, and I have 25x plus 60. Now I'll put the constant terms together by subtracting 60 on both sides of the equal. And so I do the math, and I have 420 is equal to 25x. So my final step is to divide by the 25 on both sides to get the x truly by itself. And when I do that, I get that x is equal to 16.8 hours. And I knew the label because back at the beginning, I had identified that my x represented the hours that the IV would run. And so for both of these patients, when their IV has run 16.8 hours, they will have the same amount of fluid. So I've answered one of the questions, when will both have the same intake? The second question is how much fluid will they have received? And so I can use either formula. I'm actually going to do both of them so that you can see that either formula works. In my formula, I will substitute my x value of 16.8 where the x is. So in the first formula, y is equal to 100. Instead of x, I substitute in 16.8 plus 480. I do that math on my calculator, and I came up with y equals 2,160. Or I could do the other formula, because truly they're supposed to be equal, and so mathematically they truly will be equal. So in the second formula, I would have 125. I substitute in the value of 16.8 where the x is, and then I have plus 60. And again, with the help of my calculator, I typed this into my calculator. I came up with the y equals 2,160. And so based on the way we set up the problem, we said y is the intake, and the intake in the scenario is measured in milliliters. So they will have received 2,160 milliliters of fluid when the time is 16.8 hours. So substitution method is all about replacing a variable with either a formula or number. And so when we're asked to solve using the substitution method, we replace a formula or number. And we use that to replace the variable.